Get ready to hear some timeless historical radio broadcasts. Thank you for visiting Golden Age Radio. Listen to the complete NBC and CBS D-Day broadcasts on rebel.com/C/GAR. Support our veterans by visiting veteransradioministry.com. Let's honor their sacrifice. Thank you.
5 p.m. GRUEN, Gruen Precision Watch Time. The Curvex, accurate, dependable. WEAF, New York.
This is Don Hollenbeck in New York. We delay our program momentarily to bring you late invasion bulletins. A German military commentator admits Allied operations in France have been extended to a front of about 140 miles. He further says the Allied beachhead between Cherbourg and Le Havre is 25 miles long by a few miles deep. And this final admission by the enemy that the Nazi defenses are finding it difficult to cope with the many divisions of airborne and parachute forces which have landed in swarms between Le Havre and Cherbourg. But NBC's W.W. Chaplin, reporting direct from London, said only an hour ago there are evidences of anxiety among the Allied leaders, probably as a bulwark against any over-optimism on our part. Chaplin described our invasion troops as being very tired and waiting to get their second wind. NBC shortwave monitors heard a Berlin broadcast admitting the loss of Bayeux, an inland town about 40 miles from Caen. This news came to you from the NBC newsroom in New York.
When a Girl Marries. Certo, the natural fruit pectin that jams and gels fruits the quick, certain way, presents When a Girl Marries, a story of young married life dedicated to everyone who has ever been in love. This summer, promise yourself that every berry, every bit of fruit you can get your hands on will be put by for next winter's good eating. Yes, can and preserve and make your own delicious fruit jams and clear, sparkling jellies. The more, the merrier eating for the box lunchers, the morning toast eaters, and, well, I guess just everyone in the family. Now, if you're like most women, time's pretty precious. So you won't want to spend time over a hot stove, stirring, boiling, testing jams and jellies. Instead, you'll want to do what champion jelly makers have been doing for years. Make your sweet spreads with Certo. Yes, ma'am, prize-winning jelly makers discovered years ago that they could make sweet spreads faster, more delicious, and fresh-flavored with Certo. Oh, Certo will give you beautiful jams and jellies in a fraction of the time you'd spend the old-fashioned way. Just a half-minute boil for jelly, a minute for jam, and all fruits set with Certo. So, of course, you get more finished spreads, because the juice hasn't time to boil away in steam. With Certo, there's an average bonus of 4 more glasses than you'd get from the same amount of fruit made the long boil way. So, when you make jellies and jams this summer, have them more delicious, more fresh-flavored. Make them with America's favorite fruit pectin, Certo. Start now. Get fruit, sugar, and Certo. And now, When a Girl Marries, the story of Joan and Harry Davis. Last night, Joan decided that she could no longer stay with Harry. Not when he had gone to Betty Skidmore, when she asked him not to. When she had told him that she would leave him if he did. Now, the next morning, there's a ring at the doorbell of the Field house in Stanwood. Lily, with a clutch of fear at her heart, is certain that it's Harry Davis who has come after Joan and Sammy. And Mrs. Field is bracing herself to meet him as Nettie swings open the door and cries out,
Why, Mr. Stanley. Excuse me, I guess I should say Captain Stanley.
Hello, Nettie. You certainly should. Is Mrs. Field home? Oh, there you are. Say, am I glad to see you.
Phil Stanley. I don't believe it.
Yep, I'm invalided home, although I don't feel much like an invalid. Well, what do you think about being a captain and say, hello, who is this? Hey, this couldn't be. Don't tell me. This great big guy isn't my godson.
Oh, Mr. Stanley, the Lord be praised if you isn't like manna from heaven.
Lily, well, what do you know? This is a homecoming to end all homecomings. I just don't believe you're here. I just don't believe that's Sammy. Hello, young fella. Are you Sammy Davis?
Sammy Davis.
Why, he's gigantic. Why, he's ready to fly a P-38. He's a humdinger. Mrs. Field, don't tell me Joan's here, too.
Yes, she's here, but she's asleep.
Oh, say, this is out of this world wonderful. I had no idea she was home. Mother never said a word about
She
it.
arrived last night. And look at you, Mr. Stanley, with all them ribbons on your chest. My, but you look good.
Say, if I look good, you ought to know how good you look to me, all of you. And you too, Nettie. Oh, it's just like old times to be home again. Just like old times to be over here in your house and to have Joan here, too. Don't tell me Harry's upstairs.
No, and Harry's still in Beechwood.
I can't get over it. Coming home and finding everybody I want most to see right next door. Hey, Sammy, haven't you got something to say besides looking at me out of those big blue eyes? Hey, he's a spitting image of Joan, isn't he?
Yes, I think he looks a lot like her.
Tell me everything, Lily. Tell me, how's Mrs. Cameron? And how's my farm getting on? Golly, I've got a lot to catch up on.
Yes, sir. Miss Cameron, she's fine. And the farm is fine, too. They got a good price for the potatoes, and they got more in the ground coming up so fast you can almost hear them grow.
Oh, say, that's great. And what about her kids? What about Kathy and Rudy?
Oh, they're fine, too. Well, sit down, Phil, and have a cup of coffee with us. We're just going to have breakfast.
You don't have to coax me. Oh, it's so good to sit here at your table and look at you all. Come on, Sammy. Can't you say something to me? Can't you say Phil? That's my name. Can't you say, hi, Captain?
Say Captain Phil, Sammy. Go on, go on.
Cup Phil.
That's it. Now you've got it.
Oh, he's so taken with you, Captain Stanley. He can't take his eyes off you. He won't even eat the rest of his breakfast.
Say, maybe I ought to stay outside till he's through.
Go, Cup Phil. Go, Cup Phil.
He wants to go to you. He wants for you to take him.
Oh.
Well, I like that when he wouldn't even let his grandmother come near him.
Oh, well, he feels different about me. You see, I'm his godfather. You've got to stay on the right side of a godfather because he's supposed to shower you with things.
Take Sammy, Cup Phil.
Oh, okay. Hey, how do you get him out of his contraption?
I'll lift the tree.
All right. All right, big boy. Up you go.
Down. Put Sammy down. Sammy Big Boy.
Oh, golly, will you listen to that little tyke talk? He can say everything as plain as day, can't he?
Cup Phil, go bye-bye. Sammy, take Cup Phil, bye-bye.
Oh, now, what the dickens does that mean?
I'm not sure. You see, he just arrived. It means he wants you to go out and play with him, Captain Stanley.
Why, sure. We'll go out and play, Sammy.
Only you'll let Captain Phil have a cup of coffee, won't you, Sammy?
No.
Oh, no.
Sammy, take Cup Phil, bye-bye. Come on.
You come on, Sammy. You come on out to the kitchen with Lily and get your egg. You ain't finished your breakfast, and you ain't never going to finish it, filling your eyes full of Captain Stanley in that uniform either. Come along with Nanny, Sammy, and eat your egg good. Then you can come back and Captain Phil will go out and play with you.
No.
Yes, you do like Lily said. Do you hear? I don't want any more argumentation.
Go, Cup Phil.
I ain't never seen him take to nobody like he's took to you.
Well, that's fine. That's the way it ought to be, isn't it? That's the way a guy should feel about his godfather.
No, Nanny, go away. Bad Nanny. Sammy, go, Cup Phil.
I just got to pick you up bodily, Sammy Davis, and carry you out to the kitchen.
There he goes.
Well, you made quite a conquest, haven't you?
I honestly think he liked me.
Well, I don't see how he could help it, Phil. You look simply wonderful. I hope you're going to wear that uniform for a long time.
Yeah, not so long now. Not so long now that I'm honorably discharged.
Sit down here and let me pour your coffee for you.
Will you have anything else, Captain Stanley? Some toast?
No, not a thing. Nothing, thank you.
It's awful good to see you home.
When did you get here, Phil?
I got here last evening. The minute I woke up and got out, I jumped the hedge and came over here. And whom do I run into but the Davis family?
Yes. They arrived late last night, too, or rather early this morning.
And what about Sylvia, Mrs. Field? How's she?
Sylvia's married to a naval officer. She's in Norfolk just now.
Little Sylvia married?
Uh-huh.
What do you know about that? To whom?
To Chick Norris.
No, not the chick. Golly, do you mean after turning him down all those times, she finally said yes?
Oh, she not only said yes, but she loves him.
Well, it certainly shows that persistence wins the race, doesn't it?
Sometimes. Oh, Phil, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so terribly glad to see you today.
Oh, gee, thanks. Oh, but why today?
Because it's almost like fate having you walk in here just now, just at this minute, just at this point in Joan's life.
Well, what do you mean?
You like sugar, don't you, Phil? And a little cream?
Yes, thank you. Well, what about Joan?
She's left Harry. She's come home to me.
Left Harry? Oh, I don't believe it. Why, they're crazy about each other. I never saw two people more crazy about each other than Joan and Harry.
They were crazy about each other.
But I saw them together. Harry's a great guy. Why would Joan want to leave Harry?
Oh, Phil, there's so much to tell you, and there's so much I don't know myself. Joan was too tired to talk for long after she got here, but Lily's told me a little about it. Things haven't been going well between them for a long time.
I don't get it. Joan would never leave Harry, never in a million years. Oh, aren't you exaggerating, Mrs. Field? Isn't she here on a visit and you're hoping she'll stay a long time?
She told me herself she'd come home to stay.
But how? Why? I don't understand. What could have happened?
Why, Phil Stanley.
Joan!
I don't believe it.
Oh, I didn't know you were up here. I didn't even know you were awake.
Oh, Phil, you look wonderful. You look simply gorgeous, doesn't he, Mother?
He certainly does.
You look pretty gorgeous yourself.
Oh, I look terrible. I was practically all night driving over here. And if I'd dreamed you were here for breakfast, I'd have dressed up instead of coming down this way with my hair down.
That's the way you always used to wear your hair, Joan. Around your shoulders like a golden cloud. No wonder you've got such a handsome son.
Oh, Sammy, you've seen Sammy?
Seen him. Sammy's mad about Phil. Calls him Cap Phil.
Oh, does he like you already?
Well, he ought to. I've liked him so long. Kidding aside, Joan, he's a great guy.
Well, I'm glad you like him. Did he behave all right, Mother?
Well, he wouldn't look at me or speak to me, and he cried every time I came near him. Otherwise, he behaved beautifully.
He'll get used to you when he's been here a while.
Oh, if you only knew how good it sounds to hear you say that, Joan.
I'll say it sounds good with me back here for keeps.
For keeps?
Yeah, I've been invalided out of the Army, but I'm fine now. Except that I'm not so much use to Uncle Sam as I was before I was wounded.
Oh, Phil, I didn't know you'd been hurt.
Yeah, but it's all over. I've got my reward.
Your reward?
Yes, seeing you, all of you again. Having you here when I get home.
We'll be back in just a moment. But now, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, juicy, ripe, and luscious sweet, ready to turn into delicious jellies and jams with Serto. Oh, no sugar? Oh, well, shucks. Haven't you heard? Each sugar stamp 40 in your family's number 4 ration books is worth 5 pounds of sugar for home processing. In a family of 4 people, that's 20 pounds of sugar, ma'am. And for more sugar, be sure to see or write your ration board. They'll tell you how to get extra sugar for canning, preserving jams and jellies. Wonderfully delicious jams and jellies with Serto. How to do it? Well, with each bottle of Serto, there's a booklet with 90 different recipes for all the popular berries and fruits. Every recipe's home-tested to make sure it's right. Follow these recipes exactly, and even if you've never even thought of making sweet spreads before, in just 15 minutes after preparing fruit, you can have beautiful jam or jelly topped with paraffin, cooling on the table. So don't wait. June berries will soon be gone till next year. Save yours now in luscious jams and jellies with Serto. In the dining room of the Field home, Phil Stanley stands smiling down into Joan's eyes. Phil, her playmate and companion through childhood, whom she has almost forgotten, but who has not forgotten her. Well, there until tomorrow at this time, we leave the story of When a Girl Marries, written by Elaine Carrington. This program is presented by Serto, the largest-selling bottled natural fruit pectin in the world. Remember, ladies, you get more and better jams and jellies from the same amount of fruit that certain way with Serto. C-E-R-T-O. Serto. Your announcer is Charles Stark.
or Minute Gelatin.
Minute Gelatin, oh, Minute Gelatin. It helps conserve your precious food. That's Minute Gelatin. Minute Gelatin.
Uncle Sam has a new slogan, Food Fights for Freedom. Produce, conserve, share, and play square. And Minute Gelatin helps to conserve food. It's a plain, unflavored gelatin that works wonders with leftovers. Leftover meat, chicken, fruit, vegetables can be turned into substantial main dishes.
It helps conserve your precious food. That's Minute Gelatin. Minute Gelatin.
This is the National Broadcasting Company. WEAF, New York.
This program will be interrupted for any invasion bulletins.
What's new? What's new? Post Raisin Bran is new. A cereal sensation, a magical combination. Post Raisin Bran, it's new.
Post's Raisin Bran, the exciting new cereal that's rich with raisins, presents...
We love and learn. We love and learn the romantic story of Andrea Reynolds.
Gardeners are very spoiled people. Every day they can pick themselves a different set of greens for lunch and salad and a plate of lovely new vegetables for dinner. But when it comes to breakfast cereals, well, we never yet heard of anyone growing their own. But shucks, who'd want to? Now that we can buy Post's Raisin Bran at the grocer's. Yes, I said Post's Raisin Bran. It's delicious, it's different, it's new. You've never before tasted anything quite like this combination of golden wheat and bran flakes, plus lots and lots of California seedless raisins. Yes, lots of raisins. Not a mere 1 ounce, not just 2 ounces, but 3 full ounces in each 11-ounce package. And of course it's the raisins that make the big difference in this delightful cereal. Real 40% bran flakes plus seedless raisins make Post's Raisin Bran just the right combination. Right for flavor, right for nourishment, and right for regularity. But don't take my word for it. No, indeed. Try this delicious combination of toasted wheat and bran flakes, plus lots of seedless raisins for yourself. Look for the blue and white box and the name P-O-S-T-S, Posts, printed on every package. Ask for Post's Raisin Bran by name. It's new.
Now, we love and learn. In Andrea's heart, there's a growing fear that the tragedy which has befallen Jim and his young wife, Margaret, is about to affect the plans she and Bill have made for an immediate marriage. She knows that in Jim Martin, Bill sees himself, and in the place of Margaret, he pictures her. Margaret. Andrea finds herself wishing that Colonel Rogers had not given her the job of breaking the news of her husband's condition to a young woman she doesn't even know. What is she going to say to her? How can she convince Jim's wife of her duty to her husband in this crucial period of his life? In the large, homey kitchen of Mrs. Van Cleve's boarding house, Andrea and Taffy and Mrs. Peters are discussing Jim's sad plight. Taffy, outwardly sympathetic but secretly pleased with the turn of events which threaten to disrupt Andrea's plans, and Mrs. Peters, who intends to use the Martins' tragedy as a weapon for the same purpose, have joined forces in an attempt to make Andrea see the foolhardiness of a war marriage. To bring home her point, Mrs. Peters has just asked Andrea if she really thinks Margaret will be willing to take back a crippled husband, and Andrea answers her,
Well, of course she will if she loves him.
Well, that's a pretty severe test of a woman's love, I think.
If love can't stand being tested, it isn't much to start with.
You're very right, my dear. I don't know Mrs. Martin, and I may be wrong, but I do feel that if her love for Jim had been strong and real, It could have withstood the test of a separation.
But perhaps
She could have waited until he came back to marry him. She wouldn't have added to his responsibilities, and he wouldn't be worrying himself to death with reproaches now.
But what's the difference? It's still a question of how much she loves him. Taking him back now or marrying him now, it's still the same thing.
I don't agree with you, my dear. It's Margaret's duty now to take back her husband. It's her duty to him and to society. If he weren't her husband, it would be different. Then she could act in accordance with her feelings. As it is, she no longer has that right.
Mrs. Peters, you've just said a mouthful.
I what?
Said a mouthful. For the first time since you arrived in this house, I find myself agreeing with you. But completely.
Well,
thanks, Taffy.
Don't you see, my dear, if Margaret does take Jim back now, he can never be sure she didn't do it out of pity.
Well, that's why Colonel Rogers wants me to talk with her, to help her avoid Jim suspecting it may be pity.
Pity is a hard thing to live with, Andrea. Today it's pity, and tomorrow it's contempt. Jim Martin knows that.
But if they hadn't been married and she wanted to marry him now, couldn't he feel the same way? Couldn't he still feel it was pity that was making her do it?
Sure he could, but he wouldn't.
Why not?
Because a guy in love believes what he wants to, and he'd want to believe that the girl had a choice.
Exactly. Miss Graham, I must say you surprised me. I didn't expect...
When you're right, Mrs. Peters, you're right. I never let my personal feelings interfere with my common sense. I wish Andy'd take after me. And not with an axe, either.
We agree again, Miss Graham. If only Andrea would use her intelligence instead of her emotions.
Well, as long as you two are getting along so beautifully, I think I'll go get ready for my appointment.
Oh, Andy, for the love of Mike, don't go getting hurt. It's for your own good.
If you listen now, my dear, you'll be grateful someday. You'll know what good friends we were to you.
Well, there's just one thing I want to say before I go. You're both wrong, and time will prove it. When two people love each other, nothing in the world matters so long as they have each other. Duty, obligations, right, wrong, they're only words. They don't count. Margaret has Jim back alive. If she loves him, that's all that'll matter. That he's come back alive.
You are in, aren't you? Yeah, all in. What do you want to leave me with my hands full of Mrs. Peters for?
Don't tell me you're bored already, Taffy. Why, you've just discovered that you and she are soulmates.
I'm getting a real kick out of you, Andy. You're doing all right.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. You've come a long way since you landed in New York. There's hardly any hay left in your hair. Now, if you'd only get the cobwebs out of your eyes.
Well, if you think your tongue is the broom that's going to do it.
Oh, better and better. There's hope for you. Someday you're going to crash your way right through those great big trees and actually see the forest.
Oh.
Come on, Andy. Get down off your high horse before you fall and break your neck. I'm only doing what's best for you.
In your opinion.
And I've got a lot of respect for my opinion. It's built on a solid foundation of extensive experience.
Well, you paid for it. I suggest you use it yourself.
Can I help it if I've got a big heart? Want to share my experience with my friends?
Well, I don't want your experience. I want my own. Nobody's going to live my life for me. I don't want any shock absorbers.
Spoken like a man.
Oh, Taffy.
Now, look, Andy. All this highfalutin talk, this battle of wits, isn't getting us anywhere except sore at each other.
Well, I'm ready to quit whenever you are.
I've been pulling my punches up to now, but if you want a showdown with me, you're going to get it.
I don't think that's necessary. You've made your attitude quite plain.
Well, I'm going to make it plainer. You're sore anyway, so I may as well give it to you straight.
I've got it straight. You don't approve of my marrying Bill.
Bill isn't the right man for you.
You've said that before.
And his mother says it. Maybe for a different reason, but we're both right. Now, don't get me wrong, Andy. I'm not saying it because I don't think Bill has the makings of a nice enough guy. It's just that, well, he's still all tangled up in his mother's apron strings. I'm warning you, honey. If you marry him now, he'll never get untangled. What's more, he'll end up tying those apron strings around you, too. And one fine morning, you'll find yourself choking to death.
Well, what would you suggest I do? Tell Bill to choose between his mother and me?
Oh, yeah, I can just see you doing that. Besides, it wouldn't do a bit of good anyway. A man's got to be a man on his own. Not because a girl he's madly in love with asks him to be.
Are you all through, Taffy?
Talking, maybe. But I'm not through trying. Not by a long shot.
Then suppose I ask you to mind your own business.
Won't do you any good. I'm an obstinate son of a gun, and I'm your friend. And that makes you my business.
Miss Andy?
Yes?
There's a telephone call for you.
Telephone for me, Mr. Bones?
That's right.
Oh, thank you.
It's a man with an awful mellifluous voice.
Well, I wonder who it is.
Well, I expect you could find out by accident.
Excuse me, Taffy. I'll be back in a few minutes, but don't wait unless you want to.
Oh, I'll be right here. I've got nowhere to go.
Hello?
Miss Reynolds?
Yes?
Colonel Rogers speaking. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you. I was just getting ready to leave for the hospital.
Good. That's why I'm calling you. Mrs. Martin has already arrived.
Oh?
She came a little sooner than we expected. She's waiting now, so if you can hurry a little.
I'll get there just as soon as I can.
That's fine. And, Mrs. Reynolds.
Yes, Colonel?
Please come to my office first before you inquire for Mrs. Martin. Some unexpected developments have occurred in Private Martin's case that I must talk to you about before you see his wife.
So the interview Andrea's been dreading is actually upon her. As she turns away from the telephone, her heart beats with sickening rapidity, and her mind is trying frantically to remember all the things she intends to say to Margaret Martin. More about Andrea Reynolds in just a moment. But first,
3 cheers for the newest thing in cereals. That's Post's Raisin Bran. 3 more cheers for the 3 full ounces of raisins in each 11-ounce box. That's a lot of raisins, lady. And extra raisins mean extra flavor in this delightful new cereal combination. Yes, I said delightful. For that's the word for crunchy golden wheat and bran flakes combined with chewy seedless California raisins. No wonder folks all over town are falling for Post's Raisin Bran first time they try it. They know a good thing when they taste it, and so will you. Put Post's Raisin Bran on your shopping list right now. You'll find it at the grocer's. Look for the blue and white box with the name P-O-S-T-S, Posts, printed on every package. Be sure to ask by name for Post's Raisin Bran. And remember, it's delicious, it's different, it's new.
all Andrea's worry about tomorrow's meeting with Margaret Martin will not prepare her for what happens when she arrives at the hospital. For Colonel Rogers has a startling request which forces her to change all her plans.
You'll want to hear tomorrow's chapter of We Love and Learn, brought to you by Post's Raisin Bran, a magic combination of crisp toasted bran flakes and choice seedless raisins. Remember,
What's new? What's new? Post Raisin Bran is new. A cereal sensation, a magical combination. Post Raisin Bran, it's new.
yes, Post's Raisin Bran, your announcer, Bernard Dudley.
Laddie, Jip, smart dogs, listen. Do you know any fussy little dog who turns up his nose and says, I won't eat when he gets food he's not used to? Then put him on the trail of Gaines. Gaines. Gaines Dog Meal, the complete meal that gives you your meat meal, minerals, vitamins, Everything a dog is known to need. It's been a favorite of big kennels for years. So speak. Speak for Gaines. America's largest selling dog food.
This program came to you from New York. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
It's 6:60 on your dial for the 6 o'clock news. 30 minutes from now, listen to Don Hollenbeck's summary of the evening news. WEAF, New York.
Just Plain Bill, usually heard over most of these stations at this time, will not be broadcast today in order that the National Broadcasting Company may bring you the special program that follows. Just Plain Bill will be heard at its regular time tomorrow. Now, NBC continues its coverage of operations in Europe with a special broadcast from NBC's staff in England. We take you now to London.
This is W.W. Chaplin in London. It is now 11:30 p.m., and we hope in a few minutes to have the latest communique concerning the invasion from SHAEF, Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. That will be SHAEF communique number 4. We are expecting to receive it momentarily now. In the meantime, I can tell you that the invasion is still going well, though it would be a great mistake to overemphasize the tremendous successes we've had in the initial phase. SHAEF itself has made a great point of this today, calling attention to the fact that our men have now been fighting for almost 48 hours under very difficult conditions, and that they have not yet got their second wind to carry them on to new victories. Here is one late dispatch which came in just a few minutes ago from NBC's George Wheeler, who has been with the American naval forces in the Channel since before the invasion began. Wheeler tells of the loss during the first invasion phase of a United States destroyer, the name of which I am not yet privileged to disclose. He says this destroyer had gone in quite close to the French shore, and apparently one of the enemy shore batteries got her range and just pumped her full of shells. George Wheeler says that as many of the destroyer's crew as could got off before she sank and were picked up by a nearby ship. But it's impossible at this time, he says, to say what percentage of the destroyer's crew was saved. After the destroyer was sunk, says Wheeler, the German battery was silenced within 3 minutes by the venerable battleship Nevada. Well, that just goes to emphasize what I've been saying in these broadcasts ever since the invasion began before yesterday's dawn. We're bound to have many losses in all branches of the services, and it is only safe to presume that some of them may be heavy losses. And now, as we haven't yet received that SHAEF communique number 4, which I told you we're expecting, I would like you to listen for a moment to one of the reporters who's been right in the thick of invasion activity and who's returned with a first-hand eyewitness story. This man is Robin Duss, war correspondent of the British Broadcasting Corporation, whose assignment took him across the Channel with the United States Navy. And now you'll hear Robin Duss himself.
Aboard the United States ship Barnett, very gallant veteran of Guadalcanal, Naples, and Salerno, we heard over the speaking tube 1,000 yards from the anchorage. The young navigator pored over his chart, and the voice continued quietly over that tube. 500 yards, 100, 50 yards, let her go. We dropped anchor on a pinpoint bearing. Winches creaked. The soldiers went quietly to their debarkation stations. The experience of other landings was at work, and boatloads of men who an hour before had sat down to a steak breakfast were in the water, milling around in the choppy seas, waiting for the hour that had come to have an almost mystic significance, H hour. But even then, we could hear the drone of the air transports, the transports that were carrying the paratroops to land behind the defenses. As they drew over the coast, faint bursts of flak went up to meet them. But soon we saw the glare of fires, and we knew that those men had dropped to earth and done their work. And then the bombardment. For 3 hours the ship quivered, and the air pulsated with the sounds of the greatest bombardment ever conceived. 500 tons from the Royal Air Force for each of 10 gun batteries. For each battery, the weight that came down on London in the worst raid. Ton after ton of high explosive from the naval guns. The dull thud of explosion as the paratroops used their dynamite. And then the American daylight bombers. The landing craft were just offshore. Smoke was down, and in the boats every man was tense, waiting for the shock of that first landing. And then the heavies dropped their load. They lifted that beach right in the air, killed everything living, smashed the defenses. The taut hardness of the jaws of those American soldiers softened into a smile of almost inexpressible relief. The last bomb dropped, and it was H-hour, D-Day. It's difficult to look back at the moment, at the days and hours of anxious expectancy beforehand, at the picture in the Bay of the Seine all through the day. It's difficult to look back and to make order out of the vast complexity of planning and timing and power. In front of you lies the coast of France, flat and green, broken here and there by the spire of a church or by a rise in the contours. On every side, to the horizon and beyond, a fleet of ducks and landing craft roaring their way to and from the beaches, of landing ships opening their bellies to disgorge their men and material, of destroyers and coastal craft on constant watch for the enemy's E-boats and U-boats, of battleships and cruisers, Arkansas, Nevada, Texas, Hawkins, Enterprise, Quincy, some of the proudest names of the American and British fleets, steaming close into the enemy shore, pouring in their broadsides to the German strong points. It was a picture that put a lump into your throat and left the tears not very far from your eyes. And all the time, high overhead, liberators and fortresses, marauders, lightnings, thunderbolts, and spitfires went on their missions of attack or protection. As the small craft came back, a new fleet hove into sight. More men and material were ready for the moment when the commanders called for them. And as they came, the small craft drew alongside the Barnett. Men whose job was done had come back to their parent ship. They brought others with them. Men whose job had also been done, and who had given their lives in the doing of it. Sad-faced sailors helped the wounded aboard and carried them to the doctors. And they carried one stretcher with a gentleness that hurt in the midst of this din of battle. The man on the stretcher was wrapped in the flag of the United States. Even at the greatest moment of this greatest of all military operations, there was a time to pay respect to the men who died in helping to win a magnificent success. Success it was. The fighting on land is hard and bitter, and only the first stage has been accomplished. But that first stage has been carried through with supreme efficiency. It's been carried through by the forces of 3 countries, integrated, equipped, commanded, and of great courage. Thank you, Robin. You have just heard Robin Duff, BBC war correspondent, who witnessed the initial phase of the invasion from a vantage point on an American naval vessel. And now, here is that communique number 4, which I told you we were expecting. It reads like this, quote, Allied troops have cleared all beaches of the enemy and have in some cases established links with flanking beachheads. Inland fighting generally is heavy. An armored counterattack in the Caen area on Tuesday evening was repulsed. Enemy resistance is stiffening as his reserves come into action. The landing of troops and seaborne military supplies continues on all beaches, despite the northwesterly wind which has persisted since the assault. Shortly before dawn today, light coastal forces, while sweeping to the eastward, encountered a superior force of enemy craft. Action was immediately joined, and damage was inflicted on the enemy before he could make good his escape. Enemy coastal batteries, which were still in action today, have been silenced by Allied naval forces. It is not yet known whether all has been finally reduced. Allied aircraft have been directing the fire of the USS Texas, Captain C.A. Baker, USN, wearing the flag of Rear Admiral Carson F. Bryant, USN, and HMS Glasgow, Captain C.P. Clark, DSO, RM, who, together with other Allied warships, have been engaging inland targets behind the beaches. Allied aircraft of all types and in great strength have closely supported our land and sea forces.
Early this morning, airborne operations were resumed on a very large scale. Supplies and tactical equipment being delivered to our ground forces. In 2 operations this morning, medium and light bombers attacked large troop concentrations and military buildings close behind the enemy lines, as well as gun positions in the battle area and railway lines south of the battle area. Road, rail, and other targets, including armored vehicles, troop concentrations, gun positions, and ammunition dumps, were also attacked during the morning by fighter bombers. Heavy bombers, in medium strength, attacked focal points on the road system in the area south of Caen early this afternoon. Fighters escorted the bombers and also strafed and bombed railway yards, locomotives, trains of oil tank cars, flak towers, radio installations, and airfields over a 40 to 50-mile area south and southeast of the battle area. Continuous patrols were maintained over shipping, the beaches, and the battle area. More enemy aircraft were encountered than on Tuesday, and a number of them were shot down. That's the end of Shape Communique number 4. This is W.W. Chaplin, returning you now to the NBC newsroom in New York.
And here in the NBC newsroom in New York is Robert St. John.
And here are a few bulletins that have come in while Bill Chaplin's been talking to you. The first one is a bulletin from Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, which says that General Eisenhower has made the journey across the English Channel today to the beachhead vicinity in a Royal Navy warship. Along with him was Admiral Sir Bertram Ramsay and also several staff officers. And here's another bulletin which says that returning Marauder bomber pilots reported tonight that the French city of Coutances on the lower side of the Cherbourg Peninsula is burning. And here's something that our NBC monitors, who are sitting right outside this glassed-in studio with earphones over their heads, here's something that they have picked up today from the shortwave radio. They heard a German underground radio station reporting that Adolf Hitler is not at the Western Front at all. As a matter of fact, this German underground station said that Adolf Hitler is still at his hideaway at Berchtesgaden, and that he's been there all the time, and that this story about him being at the Western Front is just so much Nazi propaganda. And here's an interesting little story. Pilots returning from missions over the beachheads of France reported tonight that Allied aerial traffic there is so heavy that fighter planes actually have been assigned to guard the flow of this traffic and prevent collisions. Well, what that amounts to is aerial traffic cops, isn't it? These pilots say that they can see jeeps down in the streets of the French villages and towns just back of the coast. They say that emergency landing fields have now been set up, and they say that things appear to be getting under control there on the coast of France. They also said that no enemy planes were in the air in these sectors at all today. And now just let me give you a brief summary of the situation as it appears to us here in New York shortly before 6 p.m. Eastern Wartime. The Allied invaders of France have been beaten. They have beaten back the first fierce German armored counterattacks. The Allied seaborne and airborne troops are said to be making considerable progress along the Normandy coast despite the stiffening German resistance. The Germans have been cleared from all of the landing beaches. In some cases, adjoining landing areas have been linked up with the beaches. Reinforced by airborne troops from a 50-mile-long train of gliders, the Allies have firmly consolidated their holdings along a curving 100-mile front between Cherbourg and Le Havre. The first big German counterattack was made against Allied forces driving inland in the area of Caen, 9 miles inland from the Channel coast. However, this assault was repulsed by the Allied forces. The German radio said that Field Marshal Erwin Rommel has thrown reserves of the German 7th and 15th Armies into the mounting struggle. However, Allied headquarters says the Allies are making considerable progress despite the stiffening resistance and bad weather. And here's the summary of communique number 4, the latest communique from Allied headquarters. It confirms that Allied troops have cleared all the beaches, and in some areas, the troops have established contact with flanking beachhead units. Well, that's the news up to 5:45 Eastern Wartime from the NBC Newsroom in New York.
Just Plain Bill, usually heard at this time, was not presented today in order that we might bring you the special program just concluded. It will be broadcast at its regular time tomorrow over most of these stations. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
WEAF, New York. The following program may be interrupted so that we may bring you the latest war bulletins.
We now present the unforgettable radio drama Front Page Farrell, the story of a crack newspaperman and his wife, the story of David and Sally Farrell. Ladies, how often do you slip off your shoe in a darkened movie or under a restaurant table because a painful corn is annoying you? Well, why allow corns or calluses to make you uncomfortable? Let me tell you about Free-Zone. Free-Zone is a liquid. It contains pain-relieving and soothing ingredients that bring satisfying relief. Unlike pads and corn treatments which only touch the outer surface of a corn, Free-Zone actually helps remove the corn itself. All you do is follow the simple directions on the bottle. Apply a few drops of Free-Zone directly on the corn with a special glass applicator which comes in every bottle. 3 or 4 treatments are usually all that are necessary to help remove the corn easily. Free-Zone is no more trouble, no more bother to use than that. Don't put up with the torture of corns another day. Get Free-Zone, Freezone, at your drugstore today. And now, Front Page Farrell, the story of a New York newspaper reporter and his wife, Sally. With David and Sally spending the evening with their friends, Chris and Norman Barnett, Paul Dorset stayed home. And home, of course, is Professor Taylor Caldwell's residence, where Paul has been living since Sunday. We find Paul with the professor and his granddaughter, Louise.
I think you're wrong, Professor Caldwell.
Wrong, my boy?
Well, it's here, isn't it? Not there. Oh, to be in England now that April's here.
Is it, Paul? I don't think so.
Nor do I, my child. Oh, to be in England now that April's there. Here.
You see, sir?
No, I do not see. Bless my soul, I know my Browning better than that. Oh, to be in England now that April's... Let me see.
Oh, I'm sure it's there, Grandfather. It's Paul who's wrong.
Want to bet?
Bet, indeed. I'll just get my copy of Browning, young man, and prove it to you.
Oh, it isn't important, Grandfather. Sit still.
Oh, not important when that scallywag thinks he can correct me on my Browning? Excuse me, I'll bring the book back and show you.
That was mean, Paul. You know you're wrong.
Maybe. Anyway, he gets such a kick out of proving he's right.
What?
Haven't you found that out about your own grandfather? Why, this is half the fun.
Oh, I see. And what have you found out about me?
You? Oh, lots of things.
What?
Oh, that I love you. Little unimportant things like that.
Unimportant?
And that you're beautiful, and that you have wonderful blue eyes. They are blue, aren't they?
No, they are.
Silly, I'm just teasing you.
And it's not unimportant that you love me, I mean.
Unimportant? Why, it's...
Now then, my fine friend, we'll see who's right about this.
Oh, here, Grandfather. Sit here near the light.
No, never mind the light, Louise. It only draws bugs. I can see well enough. Now then, Robert Browning, Home Thoughts from Abroad.
Well, is it there, sir, or here?
It's there, you young pup, there, just as I said.
Really?
Paul, you knew you were wrong.
I did not.
Oh, to be in England now that April's there.
You know the gag, don't you, Professor?
Gag, Paul?
A joke, Grandfather. A gag is a joke.
I know, my child. It's a word they use on the radio. Now then, Paul, what gag?
About that line of Browning's. It's what a lot of girls are saying these days, you see. Only they say it, oh, to be in England now that the army's there.
Oh, Paul.
Well, you see, sir, it means...
Oh, don't bother to explain it, my boy. The humor doesn't entirely escape me, you know, even if my granddaughter sometimes thinks it does.
Oh, I never thought that at all.
Oh, to be in England...
What about the invasion, Professor Caldwell? I mean, like we were talking last night.
My dear boy, I have no intention of letting you ensnare me in another discussion of the invasion. You're a journalist. You should know more about it than anyone.
Now who's teasing who?
I'd like to have a talk with Farrell about the scrap over there. I'd like to get his ideas on it.
Well, Dave doesn't say much, really. I guess you know that.
Oh, he's so nice. Sally, too. I think they're both just grand.
They're good friends, my dear. Good friends.
Yes, I know.
Well, they're certainly swell to me. Gee, if I hadn't gotten a job with Dave, I'd never have met you.
I gather, my boy, that you refers to my granddaughter.
Oh, heck, Professor, you too.
Thank you, Paul. That's very generous of you.
Oh, Grandfather, don't tease him.
Tease him? Indeed, young lady, I'm going to leave him alone with you.
Really, sir? Don't go in on our account.
Oh, yes, Grandfather. It's such a beautiful night.
And beautiful nights, my child, are many years beyond me. Oh, Paul.
Yes, sir?
Be sure of the latch, you know.
Oh, yes, sir, I will.
One of the guards is right outside, and I'll be in my study. Call me now. Call me if there's the least little thing.
Yes, sir, I will. Don't worry.
Don't worry, young man. It isn't a matter of worry at all.
We'll be right here, Grandfather.
Very well.
Oh, Paul, honestly, when is this going to end?
What?
You know what I mean. This awful fear. I hate it, Paul. I hate it.
Oh, come here, Louise. Up here beside me.
Yes?
It isn't fear, darling. Your grandfather isn't afraid of anything on earth.
I know, but it's so awful. Other people don't live this way, Paul. They don't have guards around their houses and people following them and all this.
Other people aren't your grandfather, dear. He's a famous man. Don't you realize his discoveries, those notes he has inside? Why, they affect the war itself. He's got to be careful, darling. You must understand that.
I try to. It's just not knowing. Not knowing when something terrible might happen.
You mustn't think that way, Louise. After all, you're not alone in this, you know. I'm here, and your grandfather knows Dave Farrell is doing all he can.
Yes, I suppose I'm being silly.
And we do have a good time. Why, by Thursday, you'll be so busy you won't think a thing about it.
Thursday? Oh, your mother and father.
Mm-hmm. Gee, I can't wait to see him. I can't wait to have them see you.
Oh, I'm so glad they're going to stay here in the house.
They'll be awfully grateful, Louise. The room you fixed up for them is terrific.
I don't mean the room. That's nothing. It's just having people here. Nice people like your mother and father. Sometimes I think I want the whole house just full of people.
No, we're doing pretty well so far.
Oh, I'm serious. It helps, Paul. With people here, it makes me think maybe...
Yes?
Maybe it is foolish to be afraid. Maybe nothing will happen after all.
And now, about midnight, David and Sally are just returning home.
Oh, David, not so loud. Jimmy wakes up now. We'll never get him back to sleep.
Oh, I'm sorry, baby. I forgot. Where's Mary Lee, in the kitchen?
She put the cot in Jimmy's room. She's staying all night.
Oh,
Come on out in the kitchen, dear. Fix your lunch.
good. I'm starved.
Oh, that's not a very nice compliment to Chris. I thought her dinner was lovely.
Oh, it was. Only whenever I'm out, I never eat enough. It's the way you watch me, I guess.
Why, David, how awful. Do I watch you when we're out?
No, not really, honey. What's in the icebox?
All sorts of things. You sit down and I'll start piling things in front of you.
You make me sound like Henry VIII.
Who?
You know, the guy with the hunk of roast beef in his hand.
Oh, that reminds me, Thursday night.
What?
I meant to ask Mr. Deck if I can get a nice roast for Thursday night.
Thursday? Oh, you mean Paul's mother and father.
Here, dear, take this, will you?
All right.
It's going to be quite a party, really. Paul and his parents, that's 3. Louise and Professor Caldwell, that makes 5.
What about us?
Oh, naturally, us, dear.
Mm-hmm.
7 altogether. How about some summer sausage?
For dinner?
Idiot, now.
Oh.
Here, it looks wonderful.
Well, I think you're the one that wants it.
I do. I'm kind of hungry, too.
Oh, say, honey, I meant to tell you. We finally settled where they're going to stay.
Oh, Paul's mother and father?
Mm-hmm.
Where, dear?
At Professor Caldwell's.
David, really?
Well, heck, Sally, it does seem silly to put him in a hotel.
But does Professor Caldwell know?
Certainly he knows. You heard Paul tell us last night. He insisted. So did Louise.
I see.
Why do you say that?
I didn't say anything, dear. I was just thinking.
You said, I see. Every time you use that sentence, I know you mean something else.
Some milk?
Yes, please.
Oh, it's really all right, I suppose. Hotels are crowded. And as Paul said, they haven't a great deal of money.
But Come on, let's have it. But what?
Well, to be perfectly frank about it, David, it seems sort of, I don't know, funny.
And by that you mean...
I mean, dear, that you're the one who has to help Professor Caldwell.
Mm-hmm.
He decided to tell you about the people following him and trying to get his notes. He told you because he knew you'd help. Isn't that right?
Okay, so?
Well, it just seems to me you're losing your place, that's all.
My place? Now, what do you mean by that?
Perhaps that isn't the word exactly, but with Paul in love with Louise and with him living there, now his family going to stay there, too, I just think... Oh, I don't know. I'm all wrong, I suppose.
No, you're not, Sally. Go on. You think what?
It just doesn't seem to me that it's right, David. Professor Caldwell trusts you, don't forget.
Mm-hmm.
What must he think if you allow all those strangers to move in on him?
Strangers? Honey, it's Paul. He works for me, remember?
Yes, I know, but...
Actually, his moving in there was a break for me. I can keep that much closer to the thing.
I know, David, that's all true, and they are his mother and father. Goodness knows it's nice of Professor Caldwell to put them up.
Why, sure, honey. You're just fussing about nothing.
I suppose I am at that.
Matter of fact, I think it's going to be fun having Paul's parents here. From the way he talks, they must be pretty swell people.
Of course they are, David. Why, he's the most devoted boy I've ever known.
Sure, you just wait and see. Thursday night will be fun.
I do worry too much, I guess. It's only that I can see how much Professor Caldwell trusts you, David. I'm so eager to have you help him. Anyone can see how much it means. You must help him, David. You must.
Yes, perhaps Sally does worry too much. For as David says, it looks like the days ahead will be fun. You won't want to miss any of this interesting story, so listen tomorrow for another chapter of Front Page Pharaoh. Do painful, unsightly corns and calluses stop you from having fun at the beach or in the country? Why spoil a good time when Free-Zone will help fix up those corns? Free-Zone is a liquid containing pain-relieving and soothing ingredients that give welcome relief. When you apply it, notice the almost invisible coating it forms. Unlike pads and corn treatments which only touch the outer surface of the corn, Free-Zone actually helps remove the corn itself. And it's so simple to use Free-Zone. Just apply a few drops with the handy glass applicator which comes in every bottle. Follow directions, and after a few applications, Free-Zone usually aids in removing the corn easily. Many druggists have recommended Free-Zone for over 27 years because it works. Get a bottle of Free-Zone, Freezone, today. Front Page Farrell is on the air again at the same time tomorrow at 5:45 p.m. Eastern Wartime over this station. Be sure to listen. This is Mark Goodson saying goodbye for Front Page Farrell and inviting you to listen to Easy Aces, radio's distinctive laugh novelty, on the air tonight over another network. Consult your local paper for time and station.
Get really fast, truly wonderful relief from a sudden attack of heartburn or indigestion due to hyperacidity. Carry a handy box of Bicidol mint-flavored tablets with you whenever away from home. When taken as directed, these tablets give incredibly fast relief from stomach distress due to stomach acidity. Easy to carry, easy to take. Bicidol mint-flavored tablets are only 25 cents at all druggists. Get some today.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
It's now 8 o'clock in the morning in Great Britain, the time for one of the regular news broadcasts of the British Broadcasting Corporation. I'm not sure whether the 8 o'clock news in London has started at the moment, but let's switch over to London now and see whether the 8 o'clock news has begun.
The coast of Normandy in coordination with our great airborne landings. At points, our troops have advanced several miles inland, and tanks have been reported to be moving on the town of Caen, 10 miles from the coast, where fighting was reported earlier. When BBC reporter Frank Gillard came through from General Montgomery's headquarters, there was no report of the violent reaction that is to be expected when Field Marshal von Rundstedt concentrates his forces against our operational area. It's early yet to get any firm assessment of the general situation over on the French coast, but our reporter says there was an atmosphere of confidence at General Montgomery's headquarters, fully justified by the news flashed back from our troops so far. One of the things everyone wants to know about is how our airborne forces are faring. There's no hard news yet about their part, but at least it's known that the operation of landing them, the biggest airborne expedition in history, was most successful. Another satisfactory thing about this outstanding operation is that our losses in planes were very small, considerably below what was expected. The original landings took place in the bay that stretches from the Cherbourg area, the tip of Normandy, to Le Havre in the east, and we seem to have achieved a certain amount of tactical surprise. It remains to be seen what the Germans have in store for our men. But meanwhile, as our troops and supporting arms and weapons go ashore, every hour improves our ability to meet whatever may come against us. Another correspondent at Supreme Headquarters says, all that can be said about our forces at the moment is that they are fighting strongly, under a complete air umbrella that covers not only them, but the vast force of craft moving freely backward and forward across the channel. Communique number 2 from Supreme Headquarters at the end of D-Day said reports of operations so far show that our forces succeeded in their initial landings. Fighting continues. One glimpse of the fighting in which the British, American, and Canadian and Allied forces are engaged comes from a correspondent with the Canadian landing forces. He says that in under 3 hours of fighting on the beaches, the Canadian force won its beachhead and pushed inland. The Canadian commander flashed this message to headquarters. Beachhead taken, well on the way to intermediate objective. There was some stiff fighting in the streets of the little French coast town. The Canadians met considerable enemy fire on the beaches as they worked their way among numerous steel and wooden obstacles, but they got going strongly. They took some prisoners, mopped up from small pockets of a German coast defense unit. This correspondent says that Canadian and British airborne troops did a good job when they dropped and came in by gliders to capture several important bridges and hold them. German reports have spoken of fighting at various points from the tip of Normandy to the hinterland of Le Havre. They say that there's been heavy fighting around the main highway running through the Normandy Peninsula towards Cherbourg, and they report that our airborne troops have been in action south of Cherbourg. Our landing forces here heard the roar of Allied planes almost every hour of the day and night. And last night, another great force of Royal Air Force heavies was heard going out. But all we've had so far is the familiar Air Ministry formula. Royal Air Force heavy bombers were over enemy-occupied territory again last night. They followed up a great dusk-to-dawn offensive, with thousands of bombers and fighters taking part in the greatest day in aerial history. Well over 1,000 troop carrier planes, including gliders and tow planes, were used by the Allied Air Forces. The Royal Air Force not only played its part by providing an air umbrella, some of our airmen actually landed on the beach themselves. The 1st Beach Squadron went ashore to pave the way for a steady flood of Royal Air Force personnel, who from now on will operate from the other side of the channel. These beach squadrons have the difficult job of bringing supplies to the spot. This is no easy matter. For instance, it takes 24 tons of oil and petrol to keep 4 Spitfires in the air for only 4 or 5 sorties. Only a few hours after our first landing, bulldozers were already at work laying out a landing strip for our fighters. The Sea Armada of upwards of 4,000 ships, together with several thousand smaller craft, was divided into 2 major task forces. One was under the command of the British Rear Admiral Sir Philip Byron of Cossack fame, and the other under the American Rear Admiral Alan Kirk. They were split up into assault groups, follow-up craft, bombardment ships, and mine-sweeping flotillas. Many famous British and American warships were there. They included the British battleships Warspite, Nelson, and Ramillies, and the cruisers Glasgow, Belfast, Enterprise, Mauritius, and Orion. Among the American battleships were the Nevada, Arkansas, and Texas. American naval losses so far have been given by President Roosevelt as 2 destroyers and 1 tank landing craft. He described the full operation as being up to schedule. He said that when he made his speech on the liberation of Rome on Monday night, he already knew that the Allied troops were in their boats for the Western Front offensive. The date was roughly fixed at the Tehran Conference last December, but the exact date depended on the vagaries of the weather in the English Channel. And in fact, the weather caused a delay of 1 day. Inside France, the German military authorities have clamped down on the people in some areas. Among other things, it's forbidden for more than 3 people to gather together in the streets, and from dusk to dawn, the French are ordered to stay indoors. German troops have been ordered to shoot on sight if the new code of instructions is disobeyed. The Quisling Laval has also threatened reprisals, German reprisals, for any who help the Allied army. Laval's so-called Minister for Public Order, Dalman, has already called out his militia, and the Vichy radio has warned the militiamen that stern measures will be taken against them if they try to desert their units. The voice of Free France on Algiers radio has hailed D-Day as an unforgettable day of joy and hope for the liberation of France. Behind General de Gaulle, a French spokesman said, were the French armed forces, burning with the desire to fight in France. And inside France, there was the army of the interior, the vanguard of the Allies in metropolitan France. It's revealed that General de Gaulle, now in Britain, conferred with General Eisenhower on the eve of D-Day. General Eisenhower told reporters, "We were in complete agreement on all military matters." Moscow Radio, in its service in English, has broadcast a recording of last night's speech by His Majesty King George VI. This Russian broadcast was followed by the British national anthem. Now, here are some sidelights on the operation passed on by those who've been across the channel. First, Royal Air Force pilots who flew over the front yesterday at a low level. They say we're doing very well. They saw our troops are moving forward from the beaches. Our balloons are up over the landing beaches, a precaution against low-level attack on our ships. The pilots saw our ships unloading supplies and say that by noon, tons of equipment, tanks, lorries, and armored cars had been moved off. All the pilots were impressed by the way the supplies were pouring in on the beaches and how quickly the material was being carried inland. The last thing we saw, one pilot said, was a steady flow of our ships coming back to these shores for another load. The whole business from the air seemed like a very disciplined and ordered advance. Next, crews of the torpedo boats, some of the first witnesses of the landings. They said that the shore gunfire was less than in Sicily. One of the skippers of the little ships tells how as the huge Allied landing fleet moved towards the French coast, Allied bombers hammered the beaches furiously for 3 hours. Incendiaries were pouring down from the sky like rain, and our fighters swooped over the beaches, a powerful challenge to possible Luftwaffe opposition. From what I saw, says this eyewitness, the Nazis were scared to accept the challenge. The Germans, he adds, sent up star shells which lighted the whole beach, and the German batteries hurled shells across at our ships, but many of these guns were quickly silenced. The scene was like a nightmare of color, with light from the star shells and smoke from the bombs. The Germans tried to knock out our planes with rockets that spiraled up, leaving a trail like a Roman candle, and then burst into swirling streaks of colored light. This news bulletin comes to you from the BBC in London. Now, here's a roundup of other world news. Russia. American heavy bombers have struck from bases in Russia for the first time. Scores of fortresses, heavily escorted by Soviet and American fighters, bombed the German airport in the Romanian city of Galaz at the mouth of the Danube. All the bombers returned. More German land attacks north and northwest of the Romanian town of Iasi have been beaten back by the Russians. And the Russian long-range bombers have made a mass raid on targets in Iasi itself, as well as on the railway junction there. Italy. Marshal Stalin has sent this message to Mr. Churchill. I congratulate you on the great victory of the Anglo-American forces in the taking of Rome. It has been greeted in the Soviet Union with great satisfaction. Allied troops have crossed the Tiber at many places, and some units have pushed on several miles beyond the river. They've met only weak resistance. The Lieutenant General of Italy, Prince Umberto, is reported to have asked Marshal Badoglio, who has resigned, to form a new government, to include political leaders now in liberated Rome. Marshal Badoglio's radio has broadcast a message from General Alexander telling all Italian patriots in occupied Italy, from now onwards, the German armies in Europe will be attacked from every side. The day for which you have waited has come at last. I appeal to all patriots to rise against the common enemy. Portugal. The Portuguese government has stopped all exports of wolfram to Germany. The ban has actually been enforced since Monday. This has been disclosed by the American Undersecretary of State, Mr. Stettinius, who said this action should help to shorten the war, for it will deprive the Germans of important quantities of this vital war material. Southwest Pacific. American troops are now within 1.5 miles of Mokmar Aerodrome, one of the 3 important airfields on Biak Island off Dutch New Guinea. China. Chongqing announces fierce fighting about 20 miles northeast of Changsha, the great communication center in Hunan province. The Japanese, strongly reinforced, have launched vigorous attacks along 5 separate routes. Siam. The capital, Bangkok, has been given its biggest raid of the war by Allied heavy bombers, which concentrated on the railway marshalling yards. United States. Washington discloses that the Soviet government has offered its cooperation in sending supplies to Allied prisoners of war in the Far East. The Russians have named a convenient Soviet Pacific port adjacent to Vladivostok, where the relief supplies already on Soviet territory may be picked up by Japanese ships.
Columbia's news headquarters in New York once again. We've been listening to the BBC 8 o'clock news. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in Great Britain, about 12 minutes past 8 now, as a matter of fact. And the British news broadcaster has completed the news on the invasion and was giving a roundup of other world news. We assume that you're up to date on that, and so now we have the air again back at Columbia's news headquarters. We have a dispatch from Reuters, which perhaps you might be interested in. It hasn't been given out yet. It concerns General de Gaulle. It's a dispatch from the British news agency Reuters that we received here at our news headquarters in New York. The Reuters correspondent Stanley Burt says that General de Gaulle visited General Eisenhower at the advanced command post on Sunday, 2 days before D-Day. And then the Reuters correspondent says he understands that the Supreme Allied Commander is confident that French resistance will operate effectively and prove of substantial military value to the campaign of the British, American, and Canadian liberating forces. This is Columbia's news headquarters in New York. Before we now interrupt and take a brief intermission at our news headquarters in our invasion coverage, I'd like to remind you all again that we are keeping the Columbia Network open all night. We shall, of course, interrupt all programs to bring you any news of great importance as it comes in, and at regular intervals throughout the night, we shall give you the authentic news, the details of the invasion of Western Europe. This is Bob Trout speaking. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.
From the colorful atmosphere of the LaSalle Hotel's new Pan American Room, the center of downtown Chicago, Columbia presents the music of Ralph Morrison, his saxophone, and his orchestra, with songs by lovely Chiquita and Ralph Morrison himself. Getting things started now with the Gershwin melody, it's Maybe. Variety, and here it is, Latin American style, Tico Tico. Here's a medley. Two favorites. The first, You Call It Madness, and then Ralph Morrison to sing Old Acquaintance.
I'm just an old acquaintance, just someone that you used to know. Once you couldn't be close enough to me, darling, recently acquaintance. I feel it in my heart somehow. Never thought the day would come when I would say I'm just an old acquaintance now. I know you've made a new acquaintance. I feel it in my heart somehow. Never thought the day would come when I would say I'm just an old acquaintance
From the new Pan American Room in the LaSalle Hotel, Columbia is bringing you the music of Ralph Morrison and his orchestra. Continuing now with our program, we hear the melody entitled Once Too Often. brought you music by Ralph Morrison and his orchestra, with song stylings by the maestro himself, playing for you from the new Pan American Room of the LaSalle Hotel in the center of downtown Chicago. This program, announced by Ken Nordine, has been a presentation through Columbia Chicago Studios in the Wrigley Building. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. Through these portals pass the most beautiful girls in the world.
Like a melody that haunts you night and day, just like the strain of a haunting refrain. She'll start upon a marathon and run around your brain.
Good evening, everyone. CBS presents Manny Strand and Band, playing his world-famous music from Hollywood's most glamorous night spot, Earl Carroll's Theater Restaurant, right here in the heart of Hollywood.
She will leave you and then come back again. A pretty girl is just like a pretty
There we are, Jimmy Nolan, right here from the world's largest theater restaurant, Earl Carroll's, in the heart of Hollywood. And now the man who leads the band, Manny Strand.
Thank you, Dick, and hello, everyone. Won't you join us transcontinentally as we get underway with Paradise?
Manny Strand and the orchestra, and a fine arrangement of Paradise. And now to our Earl Carroll microphone, Jimmy Nolan, to sing I'll Get By. Thank you, Jimmy Nolan. And now it's always a pleasure to introduce the friendly man who leads the band, Manny Strand.
Being at the halfway mark, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's very appropriate to give you Irving Berlin's famous Blue Sky.
Now the measures of a novelty rumba with Manny Strand and the orchestra, Raul Martinez to sing Babaloo. Raul Martinez. And now, Manny Strand.
Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent Yeoman's very fine melody. I know that you know. conclusion, spring will be a little late this year.
Quarter hour, the Columbia Network has sent your way the world-famous music of Manny Strand and band from Hollywood's most glamorous night spot, Earl Carroll Theater Restaurant, located just across the street from Columbia Square, here in the heart of the film capital of the world, Hollywood, California. Don't ever forget, for the better buy those bars. Dick Hutting speaking. This is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System. Good evening, everyone. Once again, CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System, sends music your way. Music right now by Dale Jones and Company, playing from the world-famous Hollywood Palladium on Sunset Boulevard, just across the way from Columbia Square, in the very heart of the nation's film capital, Hollywood, California. All right, let's dance. First of all, it's lovely Mary Ann to sing Tess's Torch Song.
I had a man. He was a good man. That is, you see, what I mean is I thought he was a good man. I had a friend. She was a good friend. I told my friend by my man, 'cause I thought she was a good friend. My life was sweet. Didn't I have my man? There's the world complete. Then the fireworks began. cabin. That was the end of my friend, the end of my man, and almost the end of me. And almost the end of me.
Yes, indeed, that was Peasant Short Song. Here's a wild sort of thing involving Marianne once again with Maestro Dale Jones and, as a matter of fact, the whole band. Yes, it's called Better Do It Now.
Better do it now. Better do it now. Or there ain't gonna be no after while. Better find a way. Oh, don't you dare delay. Or there ain't gonna be no after while. I got things to say. So don't wait for tomorrow. What you can do today. Better do it now. Oh, better do it now. Well, there ain't gonna be no after while.
You better do it now. You better do it now. Because there ain't gonna be no doggone after a while. You better do it now. You better find a way. Because there ain't gonna be no doggone from now on. Now you got, and I've got things to say. So don't put off till tomorrow. What you can done, get done today. You better do it now. You better do it now. Because there ain't gonna be no doggone after a while. Now the early bird gets the worm. Only a fool waits his turn. Don't look back at the past. You better get it now, because it might not last. You better do it now. You better do it now. There ain't gonna be no doggone after a while. Now wrap it up now.
Turning now to Blue Spotlights, a little Moonlight and Roses, here's lovely Marianne again, this time to sing the romantic How Sweet You Are.
How sweet you are, how sweet you are, how dear your tenderly smiling face. Through days so bitter and gray and grim, through nights when even the stars are dim, how sweet to know my heart can glow from just the warmth of our first embrace. The world's a lovelier world by far when I remember how sweet you are.
A complete change of pace here as Dale Jones calls for the measures of the good old Dallas Blues. Too soon, it's time to say so long. During the past few moments, you've been listening and dancing to music by Dale Jones and Company, playing from the Hollywood Palladium, here on Sunset Boulevard, just across the way from Columbia Square in Hollywood, California. Songs tonight by Dale Jones himself and lovely Mary Ann. Joe Walters announcing for you, this is CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting System.